Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're glad you took time to join us as we discuss how to reuse data in Power BI. And this webinar is being recorded, and in the coming days, you will see an email come to your inbox with the links to see the recording. Today's session is about the benefits of data reusability in Power BI. And we just want you through this webinar to walk away with a better understanding of how to use Power BI and get the most value out of it. Lars, if you want to move to the next slide, please. So we will be tackling this topic of data reusability in 3 webinars. First, as we explore the why of data reusability, we'll be talking about the benefits for both developers and end users. And in subsequent sessions, we'll be talking about 7 costly mistakes that organizations make when they try to implement data reusability. And then the last webinar will be about how to best do it, so best practices in data reusability. Before we go too far, let's introduce ourselves. I am Jean-Luc Coquerel, CEO of Centris Consulting, and I have the privilege of leading a talented team of BI developers and analysts, and we focus solely on healthcare analytics. I am trained as an industrial engineer in France and the United States for supply chain processes as well as healthcare. I had the chance early on to learn that with everything, there is a process. And if you can control the process, you can control the quality of the outcome. So we hope to instill a little bit of that mindset as we go through this topic today. In my spare time, I enjoy playing soccer with my 3 wonderful children, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'll turn it over to Lars to introduce himself.
All right, thank you, Jean-Luc. I'm Lars Kemmen. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect with Centrix. I have been working with Microsoft Cloud Technologies really since the public beta of Azure back in 2009. I'm also an engineer by training. My focus is on distributed systems design, whether it's software, electrical, anything in between. And I've worked with organizations ranging from startups all the way up to Fortune 500 companies on modernizing different systems. So with all of that, the way that data flows between systems and through the evolution of a system has always been a passion of mine. And that's why I'm very excited about this webinar series that we're doing on data reusability. In my spare time, I don't really have any right now. We're getting ready to welcome our first child, so all of my time is going to that. But as you can probably tell from my office here, I really enjoy reading. So looking forward to getting into this today.
Yes, and we'd like to learn more about you as well, but we're going to do that through a series of polls. And the first question we will be looking at is just understanding who is using Power BI today, or if you are considering it. So you should see the poll pop up. And also the next question will be, how do you actually reuse data in your organization today? Are there many end users doing self-service, just a few users, or is there just a one-to-one relationship between your reports and your data sets? And the last question is, what are your top concerns when it comes to reusing data assets? Do you anticipate security concerns, data accuracy, or is it just the cost? There are a few options there, just giving everyone a second to choose. So it looks like most of you already use Power BI across the organization, and that's why you're here. And when it comes to the degree to which data is being reused, looks like we are somewhere between many reusability happening. Actually, we just had some updates here. So few end users are using self-service reports. Okay, that's good to know. And security concerns rank first, and also the maintenance. Those are very good concerns. Thank you for participating in the poll. That gives us a sense of where you are coming from. So Lars, I'm going to turn this over to you to walk us through today's benefits.
All right, thank you, Jean-Luc. And yes, thank you everyone for answering the poll questions. As we mentioned at the beginning, this is really the first in a series of 3 webinars. The first webinar that we're doing today is really to lay the groundwork of what are the benefits of reusing data assets. So some of you are already seeing this, and hopefully you'll see how you can take it to the next level. Many of you, it sounds like from the poll answers, do still have some work to do in this area, and we hope that this webinar will equip you to sell that vision to your organization, as well as give you really some of the insights into why it is that organizations really struggle with this particular area of Power BI. Power BI, as you probably know at this point, is the market leader in self-service BI platforms, but the reality is most organizations are not taking advantage of everything that it has to offer. So by the end of this webinar, that's what we hope to have conveyed to you, is what is possible with the tool. We won't look at every capability, but we want to highlight the things that are most impactful for the everyday self-service user in your organization. So looking at those business and technical benefits, how data moves through Power BI so that you can understand and navigate what it looks like to develop reusable data assets inside of Power BI. And then we'll look at some examples of that through various demos. So what do we mean when we use this term data reuse? This is probably the second most important slide in the entire webinar. So this is where we get the chance to define something that most organizations miss. Most organizations will have a BI team, a business intelligence team, where requests are sent to that team for new reports. And then when a report is identified, in the best case, there might be a little bit of grouping different requests together to build one massive report that has all the slicers and all the filters that anyone could want. But there's a single data use ultimately that's being built towards. And in order to build that report, you're going to have a BI developer who works with Power BI to create a single data set. And that's pulling from, in this case, it could be just one, but it might be multiple different data sources to create a Power BI data set that then creates a single report. And that works. It's also how most of the Microsoft demos of Power BI operate, but it does not take advantage of the innovative platform, innovative capabilities that Power BI brings as a self-service BI platform. So when we talk about data reuse, we actually want to explore a scenario where the organization can leverage existing data assets to generate new insights. So instead of just a single data set with a single purpose to feed one report, we want your end users to be able to generate new ideas of how we can use that data, what value we can get from that data. And instead of just having a single purpose-built data asset or data set, we really want to think of that data set as an asset, as something that has value to your organization. That value can be leveraged many times over if it's built correctly.
Lars, I'd like to just interject there and just emphasize that concept of data as an asset. I think commonly people use that expression that data is an asset, but that's not necessarily true. And I would use the analogy of real estate, where you might say a property is an asset, but in fact, an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. And if a property is not profitable, it's a liability. And data can have the same thing where if misused, is really a liability because it creates all kinds of maintenance issues, accuracy issues, distrust, and it becomes a nightmare. And it shouldn't be viewed as an asset in that scenario. But what we are talking about here is how to properly leverage data to make it an asset that continues to generate compound value.
Yeah, a typical approach that teams will use, and I've alluded to this already, is let's create one report and try to give that report to as many people as possible. And inevitably, you'll end up with there might be the obligatory couple of charts on the first page of the report, but ultimately all anybody wants is that details page that has all the data, and then they're going to copy paste it in the worst case into Excel to analyze it, or in the best case, you've got a bunch of different slicers and filters on that details page. And everybody tries to drive all kinds of functions from that slicing functionality. And that's not a data asset, that is a liability. So let's talk a little bit more about this idea of self-service. We are going to talk about primarily this level 1 here, the self-service designer scenario. This is where really 80% of the organization lives. This is not the centralized BI creating a report that is then shared to the entire organization and everyone has those slicers available. This is also not what we might talk about in a very advanced scenario, and we'll talk about that in future webinars, where you have autonomous teams generating their own data assets or data products across the organization. We're not even really talking about the data engineering work that your BI developers would do. We're really talking about the majority of the users in your organization who might not be even trained in how to do report development with Power BI Desktop, but they can use a web application. They're creative, they have ideas, they want to be able to extract value out of the data that the organization has without having to go through that central BI team every single time they have a request. So that's our target for today. So before I jump into the demos, just a housekeeping note, we do have the Q&A feature available in the webinar. And so if you have questions as we go along, please add them to that. And we will definitely have time at the end to answer questions. All right, with that, let me switch over to the demos. And we're going to start with this scenario of a director in a hospital. And this is our Centrix Medical Center demo hospital. So please recognize there is no real data here of any kind. The data sets, the reports that you see today have all been adapted from Microsoft sample data. We're not using, Epic simulated data or anything like that. So if the data set seems superficial, that's on purpose. What we are going to do today is I'm a finance leader and I am working with the executive team at the hospital to track revenue for our hospital system. The BI team, the business intelligence team, has just built a new medical visits app or hospital visits app in Power BI. And they've added data to that in a user-friendly way that I want to discuss with the executive team. So I'm going to start by opening up Power BI. And I'm going to go to the apps page. We will talk a lot more about apps in this and future webinars. But for now, let's just jump over to apps, which are prepackaged collections of reports and dashboards that are being made available to users. So I've got this hospital visits app that has been shared with me. We can even see that the organization has certified it with an endorsement. So I'm going to open this up, and it comes with a couple of different report pages out of the box. It has some navigation on the left-hand side here. We won't talk too much about the app's user experience today, but just know that this is really what's tailored to the end user. Now, I've got this app opened, and because I'm in finance, I'm really interested in the efficiency and cost aspect of our hospital. So I'm going to go to the efficiency and cost page in the report. And right now we're interested in financial metrics for March. So let me change the slicer to the month of March. We'll go with that. So now I have this data that I filtered, right? This is very, very basic. And there are actually better ways to do what we're about to try to do, but I'm going to, for now, just create a bookmark. And I'm going to create, actually, I've created it here before. I'm going to just update this March 2023 bookmark. And now this bookmark is something that I can share in the Teams group for the executive team. So I'm going to take this link that I have here, and we'll share that in Teams. In fact, I've already done that here. So here we've got a link to the March financial numbers. And so now if somebody clicks on this, they will be taken right back to not just the app that I was in, but the specific page and even the specific filter that's been applied. So as a starting point, we are able to communicate about data using these tools. It's not just I have to copy and export data and share it with somebody else. But leadership is also interested in answering other questions. So for example, we could talk about the work that we do with children in our community. And right now we maybe have a new initiative that we're trying to do around advertising for our kids care or Caring for Kids campaign. So there are, of course, again, a lot of ways to do this, but just as a resourceful self-service user, I'm going to go back to the summary page. And you might have noticed when I had this open, there's a Q&A visual in the bottom right corner. This is one of those wonderful features about Power BI that a lot of people just skip because they don't think that it really adds a lot of value. If I'm a BI developer, I know exactly what visuals I want to put in that report. So I'm not going to add, self-service features, but this is really where some of the value of Power BI starts to shine through. So I could do something here and say, like, show me top departments by revenue. And that will give me a, let me see if I get that correctly here. Departments by revenue. I might have a filter wrong here. That might explain what's going on. All right. We're going to move on, but that's what a live demo will do for you. If I had this set up correctly, and I think part of the reason that this is broken right now is I updated the schema just before the webinar. And I think some of the synonyms in here are maybe broken. But I can actually get, if I had just typed in show me top department name by revenue, I would get a bar chart already sorted in descending order of the departments, their revenue, looking very much like the chart over here. But then I can actually filter that and say, I could say something like for the age group, 0 to 5 or less than 5. And again, if my synonyms were set up correctly for this to work, then I would be able to see that department list filtered. And let's see, did we get that added to? Okay, thank you, Corinne. Yeah, so then we would be able to have this chart here, and then I'd be able to share that with the team. For now, I'm going to just show an example of doing this with a different chart, where I can share this to teams. And once I decide that I want to share this with, in this case, my chat with the executive team, I can say, this is something we may want to highlight for our Caring for Kids opportunity. These are the departments that we work the most with among children. So I'm going to go back to Teams, and we've got this bookmark that I had shared and this highlight that I had shared with the team. And if I open that up now as one of the executive team members, it will take me right back to that report and highlight that same area that I was looking at before. Now, again, this bookmark that I had created before is showing claim versus not claim data instead of the department totals. But you get the idea. I'm able to communicate and collaborate about not just the data that was in the report, but new insights that I'm able to derive from the report, that I come up with questions on the spur of the moment and I have an answer. So that is Q&A in action. We've made progress, but so far this has all really just been very basic. We're doing self-service BI and we're only reusing an existing report. So later that day in our team meeting, let's go back to this scenario where I had shared the March financial numbers. And if you remember, I had done that by changing the slicer and then I had created a bookmark. So I can open that bookmark again, and now I'm back to the March data. But if I want to do this for April, or if I want to do this for the middle of April, this is unsustainable, right? We don't want to have to keep updating a bookmark. So it would be helpful, our leadership team decides, to have a quick at-a-glance view of the current revenue forecast. Now, I, as a finance director, I'm not trained in Power BI development, but I have a quick internal call with our Power BI champions group, and they walk me through the next couple of steps. So I've got this same app open. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to save a copy of this report. And that copy I'm going to save into our executive team, and we're going to call this the, let's call it the 7-day dashboard. So I'm going to now have this new report created for me. It's called my 7-day dashboard. It doesn't come with any of the bookmarks that I created, which is fine. And so what I'm going to do now is I've got this same report, but I'm able to edit anything in here. And that's because the app creator had given me permission to edit this report. So I'm going to go into my filters, and I'm going to go ahead and edit this report. And what I want to do is take the date from the calendar and add that to the filters on not just this page, actually. I'm going to add that to the filters on all the pages. Let me redrag that here. And what I'm going to do is change this to a relative date filter. And I'm going to say when the dates are in the last 7 days. So now by applying that, you'll notice that the chart on the bottom automatically updates. The slicers here automatically update. In fact, just to be consistent here, we're no longer going to want the user to change the date slicer on their own. This is now truly a dashboard that will always show the same data. So I'm going to actually delete that slicer here. And now I've got a report, I'll save this here, that gives us an at-a-glance view of the same data that the original hospital visits data set and app had shared with me, but always customized to what our executive team needs to know, which is how is our financial performance in this particular week for the last 7 days. So now I can take this report and I can go to Teams, and I can go to this tab here at the top, and I can click to add a new app. And I'm going to add Power BI. And then once I've got Power BI loaded and signed in, I'm going to go to my executive team workspace, select that 7-day dashboard report that I just created, and I'm going to post to the channel and say save. So now we have a new tab added within directly in Teams. People don't even have to go to Power BI anymore. And it has my dashboard that I've created. It has that relative date filter that I've added. So this view of this report is always customized to what our executive team needs to see.
And what's also key is that this report is using the same data set as the original reports. So it will benefit from any refreshes, any updates.
Exactly. Any time that the definitions of the metrics are changed. For example, if finance implements a new accounting system and the logic behind the revenue metric changes, that change will be pushed to the original medical visits app, but it will also automatically feed into this report that we've created because it's derived from the original data set. So let's actually see what that looks like in Power BI. I'm going to go back to the Power BI workspace, and let's go to executive team here. And we can actually view for this 7-day dashboard the lineage of where that data comes from. So here we've got our 7-day dashboard, and you can see if I drag this up, we're deriving that data from the medical visits data set that has this certified endorsement, and that's being published by the hospital visits environment. And we're also using that data in other places. So this is a great way to see where's my data coming from. And then if we were to look at the hospital visits itself, we could see how that data set is built also with a lineage. We'll come back to that a bit later. So at this point, we've seen data reuse in action. Let's go back and talk a bit about some of those benefits. I'm going to jump back to the slide deck. And this is a great opportunity to remind you that if you have questions that you would like to have us answer, please throw those in the Q&A feature. All right. So benefits of data reuse. As we've seen, data reuse is that ability to derive more insight from the same app or the same data asset, the same data set, instead of merely consuming static or pre-built reports. We saw with some demo glitches the ability to answer completely new questions off of existing data. We saw that we can, by thinking about data as an asset and not just something that we put together as a data set in order to create a report, but we think about the data set as an asset. We don't have to recreate that wheel, all of the engineering that went into the data set, all of the work that went into data preparation every time we want to create a new report. So this is ultimately what allows an organization to realize the benefit, the potential of self-service BI, lowering cost, reducing your expenses, and by treating those data assets, by thinking of them as data assets, as something that has value to your organization beyond just the immediate purpose of creating that first report, you will be able to start managing them as assets. When an organization manages assets, they are organized, they are cleanly and well documented, they have a life cycle, they're maintained. All of the things that you probably wish that your data assets or your data product in Power BI had, you can have that by really treating them as an organizational asset. Data reuse also is a viable step to having this.
Lars,
yeah.
Yes, I just want to emphasize what you just said there, because too often the data behind a report is masked to the report consumer, right? They just see the front end, and the data set, everyone acknowledges there is some data behind the scenes, but if you don't really recognize that that's an asset, you don't manage it, and it's just considered a step in the process. But that step is a critical step, because it can be leveraged time and time again, and that's really where you gain value after value. So that's what we mean by treating data as an asset.
Yeah, thank you. That single version of the truth, this is one of those things that every organization wants. We'll talk more about this in future webinars, because there's some ambiguity about what this really means. But by having a reusable data asset, you're moving in the direction that you can actually have a single version of the truth. If finance, for example, creates a data set that talks about your expense data and makes that available for everyone to use, now every report that is derived from that data set will have a consistent understanding of what is our outstanding, payables or things like that, being able to define that metric once and have that reused in a number of places. Owning your analytics is one of those scenarios that comes up, especially in, for example, the healthcare space, where someone like an Epic Systems will have a lockdown data mart or data warehouse type of environment. And instead of having to send every one of the team members in your organization who want to do some kind of analytics to an exhaustive Epic training that may also be rather expensive, you can define these data sets that are derived from those data warehouses that your vendors like Epic or others provide, and then own the analytics on top of those reusable data assets. And then finally, by bringing data into Power BI, there are even ways to enable collaboration with external parties. So if you have a joint initiative with a supplier, for example, Power BI allows you to control exactly how data is shared across organizational boundaries.
On that note, we actually have a question in the channel from Delise. When you share data in Teams, can another organization have access to the report in Teams if you share it with them?
Yes, absolutely. There are a number of governance settings that apply to this to keep that secure, but using the guest invite feature that is tied into the Microsoft 365 Azure Active Directory security system, you can invite guest users into Teams. And so if you have, for example, in this example that I mentioned, a supplier that you're working with on a joint initiative around cost reduction or spend contract management or something like that, then you might have guest users from that vendor who are added to your contract compliance team for purchasing. And if you share apps with that team, they will also see that. And you can control through Power BI exactly what they are able to see. Yeah, great question. So we've talked about the benefits. Let's talk about how we get there, because this is the hard part. I mentioned before that the slide where we talked about what data reuse is key. This is even more critical to having an effective deployment of Power BI. So I want to take some time to talk about what this looks like. As you can see, there's a trade-off between the short-term gains that we typically, as human beings, all know how to optimize for, and the long-term benefits that an organization really wants to realize. And the way this starts is really rather simple and kind of innocent. If a reporting team has a request that comes in and we want to, of course, satisfy our customers, we want to prioritize turning around that report request as quickly as possible. What that leads to is every request that comes in, we end up building a report for that request. What that also means is we're building a data set for every report. At best, we're probably copy pasting some of the query logic between reports so that we don't have to recreate everything completely from scratch. But as a result, we're going to end up with queries sprawling all over the place. And that leads to a BI team that is overloaded, because as soon as that underlying data database table, field name or something changes, now we have to update all of these different reports. I'm sure we've all been there where a calculation is redefined or something else happens, and now your BI team is locked down into maintenance mode for the next several months, and new requests are backlogged. So the low total throughput overall is an unintended result of really trying to meet our customers' demands as quickly as possible. Instead, if we take those customer requests, let them pile up a bit by thinking about things first, doing some design work, and prioritizing the reusability of what we create rather than the immediate time to customer satisfaction, which is not an easy thing to do, which is why we need the vision so that we can sell, especially, for example, the executives who are pushing us to have that report to them quickly. By prioritizing reusability instead of the immediate customer ask, we can design data assets that have the ability to be reused in multiple places. By reusing them in multiple places, we get consistency, which is something that we all want. And we get that ability to centralize the security. So now if we want to turn on row level security, for example, so that we can share this data set with a broader audience, but only let department managers, for example, see their own subsets of the data that's relevant to them, we can do that without having to update any number of other reports and queries. This is also going to start to instill a culture where your users feel empowered to reuse data. Once I see somebody else generating a report to satisfy their needs, somebody else who isn't a BI developer, but somebody who's on my own team, I now feel empowered that I could do that too. I don't have to be a BI developer. I don't have to have that job title over there. My friend who has just attended a couple of meetings and learned about these data sets is doing this to answer the questions that they have. I'm going to be empowered to do the same. And so this becomes a viral effect that spreads through the organization. And as a result, your BI team may be producing fewer outputs per month, but by prioritizing reusable outputs, the total throughput of the organization overall goes up exponentially.
And one thing to recognize, as you said it, is that this is not necessarily an easier pathway. Yeah. And in fact, there is much work to be done, whether you are doing it if I can call it the traditional short-term way. There is much work on both sides, in both pathways. The question is, are you going to be able to manage and control what you have, or are you going to just keep throwing new reports there, which makes the work you'll be doing less attractive, less appealing, because you're just in firefighting mode and trying to catch up. Whereas the work that you do in the reusability scenario is more interesting because you are always adding new value. Even in the earlier example where the semantic model was not updated as you you wanted it to be, that shows that you will have to spend time defining terminology and terms that the platform will recognize. But once that word is done, that dictionary can be leveraged time and time again. So it's time well spent rather than having to play catch up.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So we've talked about the path to getting there, let's talk about the technology for just a little bit. Now, this slide is busy. I've actually grayed out most of this because we won't talk about most of this. There are upcoming webinars where we can spend a lot more time talking about the different technologies involved in Power BI and Azure and Purview for organizational compliance and things like that. Right now, we're just going to talk about how data flows through Power BI in order to understand some of the terminology that Power BI uses that's a little bit different from what you might be familiar with, particularly when we get to dashboards, which is kind of infamous in the Power BI world. So let's start with where everybody starts when you're first working with Power BI, which is the free Power BI desktop app for Windows. This is where your BI developers are going to be creating reports. This is where they define their data sets. This is where they connect to data sources, define that semantic model. And this is where after the visuals are designed and everything's put together, the report can be shared. But you can't share Power BI desktop files, at least not in any effective way, and certainly not in a secure way with the organization. So we need the Power BI service. So let's take a look at that. When you have a Power BI report and a data set, and those always go together within Power BI desktop, when you have those and you publish them to the Power BI service, these are your first data assets that you're creating. And they go into a workspace, which is a collaboration environment for a team. It's actually important to understand that workspaces are not the way to share data assets broadly across the organization. We'll come to that in a minute. But the first thing you'll have is a report and a data set that report is tied to. We saw that in the demo earlier. We can create additional reports off of that same data set, and we can tie other data sets together as well. So I can chain data sets to other data sets. Now, once I've created reports and data sets in the Power BI service, I can share them here. There's organizational compliance things that come into play. I can enforce, HIPAA, high trust, those types of requirements that my security and compliance teams might have for me. But it's very important to understand that while there are many different settings that can be applied within the Power BI service, what's critical for the purposes of data reusability is that data sets can have one of two permissions for the user who is accessing either the data set directly or accessing a report or an app that points to the data set. And those two permissions are view and build. View is just what it sounds like. I can make queries against the data set and that's it. Build is what I was able to do before when I created a copy of the report. I changed the layout, changed the filters, changed all kinds of things about the report, and was able to create something that was customized to me. So understanding the difference between view and build permissions is extremely important when we start thinking about designing for reusability. Once you have data sets and reports created, we can also start creating dashboards. Dashboards in Power BI are really collections of visuals from different reports. If we have time, we can maybe look at a brief demo of that. And we can also take advantage of those reusable metrics or measures that we've created inside of data sets to actually create what Power BI calls metrics, which are tied to goals, and they can be updated either by human intervention or they can actually be pulled from your data set. So when your data set updates, then, for example, your organization's balanced scorecard for maybe the innovation initiative or the cost reduction or profitability initiative that you have for the year, that balanced scorecard can be automatically kept up to date with measures that you define in data sets as well. So data sets are the starting point for data to flow to any number of use cases within the Power BI service. We've talked about apps just very briefly before, but just to underscore, when we have these data assets in a workspace, that workspace is the environment for the team that's maybe within the BI team, or maybe a self-service group that has just created a report for their own, maybe monitoring the expenses that our particular small team has. You can collaborate within a workspace as long as that's all you're doing. But as soon as your sharing boundary crosses a team boundary, that's when we strongly would recommend that you're looking at apps. If you're using apps, you have additional control over the audiences that get access to the data. You have additional control over view and build permissions. You have additional ability to document data, and it's also much more discoverable for an end user. So if you want self-service by others, you need to be looking at apps. Finally, we've talked, again, this is really the focus for this webinar, is we've talked about the level 1 self-service maturity model, where you have users who are reusing existing data sets Sometimes we're using existing reports, but they can create their own visualizations. They can answer their own questions off of these data assets that you've created. There are additional tools within Power BI that have to do with how data gets to those data sets to begin with. Those include data flows, which are really targeted at your BI developers, and data marts, which are targeted at more of your SQL savvy self-service users. So maybe if you have a quality team where people know how to write SQL queries, but maybe they haven't been trained on Power BI development, data marts would be a great self-service tool for them. We won't spend time going into those in detail today, but I do want to show briefly in a moment here a demo of data flows and how what we've been doing so far actually rests on the reuse that we get from data flows and some of the things that that unlocks. To wrap this up then, once we have these data assets that are reusable and available in the Power BI service, there are many, many different ways to consume that data. Power BI mobile app, the Teams app that we already saw, embedding, if you have any interest in creating a data portal for external users or customers of your organization, patients, if you're a hospital system, to access a secured subset of that data, you can actually build web applications that provide just the data that they should have access to and uses the Power BI security and reporting and visualization engine behind that. So reach out to us if you have questions on that. But let's take a look at some of these demos now. We spent enough time in theory. Are there any questions that have been posted in the meantime?
No, nothing yet.
Okay. Well, let's take a look then at probably one of my favorite demos, and that I don't actually have to switch anywhere else for, and that is, we've already talked about creating reports, and we've seen how we can reuse a report inside of Teams, for example. But did you know that you can also reuse a report inside of PowerPoint? So we'll give that a second to load. So this is a feature that's actually very new. It really has only reached general availability in the last month or so, where I can do data storytelling inside of my PowerPoint presentation. So what I have here is the same report that we were using before. I copied the link. I used the Power BI add-in to PowerPoint, which is now officially available from Microsoft. It's fully supported. And I'm able to not only see this report, but I'm able to interact with it. If I didn't have my mouse on the wrong screen, I can actually change values here. This is a live report. This is not a screenshot. And this is all within my PowerPoint deck. It actually gets one step better. Not only can you embed a PowerPoint report as your entire slide, you can embed visuals as parts of your slide. So I can have a slide here like my revenue forecast, and then this revenue by date projection, this is live. If I want to hover over something here and get a tooltip, I can do that. This is transformative. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people spend valuable time building and rebuilding the same PowerPoint deck, every week, because we have our weekly meeting, and so of course we need to copy and paste in the newest slides with the newest graphics and the newest charts and visuals. This is just, I think this is one of my absolute favorite Power BI features ever.
And a lot of people, a lot of organizations go through that month-end cycle where you prepare a deck for executives, and the team of analysts spends a lot of time just massaging data, and all of that can be done in a data model so that you just refresh the PowerPoint deck and you can really analyze and draw conclusions rather than spending your time preparing data.
Yeah, let's take that one step further. So let's jump over to an additional demo around data sets. And I'm going to bring back up the live demo environment here. All right, so we're in this hospital visits workspace. And this is where we had actually published that app from. So this is where all the magic happened behind the scenes. And you'll see that we have a couple of assets here. We have, if I can get my cursor to highlight here correctly, we have the data set for medical visits. We have the report that came with it, and you can see I recently published those. we were able to certify this medical visits data set. And then we have an additional report that we created, this ranking report. And what I can do here is I can create a dashboard as part of this hospital visits app. So let's say that there's a particular visual on the regular report that's valuable to me that I want people to always see. Let's say it's, you know, this revenue by date forecast. Let's say we pin that to a new dashboard and say, let's call this dashboard key statistics. So that dashboard is being created inside of our workspace. And now I'm going to go back to the workspace, and let's also go to this ranking report that I had created, which uses the same underlying data set. This table is not particularly pretty. Let's not worry about that too much though for right now. Let's just pin this visual to the dashboard as well. And now if I go back to the workspace, you'll see I have this new key statistics dashboard. And so I'm going to open up that dashboard, and you'll see these pinned visuals from multiple different reports that can even be from multiple different underlying data sets. And there's actually Q&A built into dashboards as a first-class feature. You don't even have to add a Q&A visual. So here, if I wanted to, again, ask about, you know, top departments or answer new questions, that's absolutely built in. So let's go back to hospital visits, and we can publish this app. We can just update it. I'm going to go to the content for this application, and I'm going to add content, and I'm just going to make sure we have that key statistics dashboard added as well. I don't want to add the ranking report to this particular dashboard because it's really just not quite ready for general consumption, but I do want to add that key statistics dashboard, and then I'm going to drag that to the top of the list so that people see the dashboard first. And then I'm going to update the app. So now this will take a moment to be effective. But if I go to the app now, I will see not just the report, but if this is already updated by now, yeah, it was too quick for it. We will see that dashboard has been added to the app as well. Usually in a demo environment, this is pretty quick. So we'll come back to that. So that was the first thing I wanted to share, is this ability to use and create dashboards. The second thing I want to share is the ability to analyze the data. And this gets back to that month-end scenario. Every organization uses a couple of critical tools. We've already seen Teams and how you can integrate Power BI reusable data assets into Teams, and how that's really an ideal environment for self-service. We've also seen how you can embed those reports into PowerPoint and save people countless hours in creating and updating and maintaining presentations. I'm just going to assume that this isn't going to update right now. But there's one additional feature, one additional tool, I should say, that every organization has relied on since before the dawn of the internet to do data crunching, and that is, of course, Excel. So I'm going to take this same demo report here, and I'm going to say analyze in Excel. And that is going to create an Excel file. I've actually done this earlier just to save ourselves a few seconds. And this Excel file comes with everyone's favorite tool, Power Pivot, or pivot tables, already connected to your dataset's schema. So you'll see the KPI table that I had in my dataset. You'll see the age group table, the department table. All of these are available for me to drag and drop and create pivot tables, pivot charts, and all of the other analytics experiences that you're used to in Excel. The difference is, in this experience, when I click to refresh my data, it will actually refresh it directly from Power BI, and it will actually be a live connection. So that's Excel analytics using pivot tables. There's actually one other feature that can benefit not just your new Excel files that you might create using these reusable data assets, but even your, what I'll call your legacy Excel files. You can enrich files that already have tables of data with data from Power BI. And this is probably the least demoed Power BI feature of all time. It's been in the product for years, and I almost never see people using it. So I'm going to zoom in here just so everyone can see what I'm doing. I've got some just completely simple text. This isn't even formatted as a table. I've just got text that is my departments that I may be interested in doing some capacity planning with. And what I want to do is figure out the total beds that each department has available. Now, I know that that data is available in Power BI, and so I could find a report somewhere and try to, massage together the right query or the right visual and try to get it in exactly the format that I want here. Or I could just recognize that in our data set, we took the time to define departments as an organizational featured table, which allows departments to show up inside of Excel for people as a data type, as a first class object that Excel understands natively. So I can click on department here and it will actually interpret these department names, connect them to the data set. You'll notice the little briefcase icon now. So these are actually live connected fields, and I can see the data that Power BI has in my feature table about this department. Not only that, I can actually add that data directly next to it. So I can say beds available, and it will be added here. And you can see the query here is a2.beds available. And I can even just drag that down and get the statistics for the other departments. So this is taking a data asset that we've created inside of Power BI, and I maybe never envisioned that how somebody else might end up using it. But by taking the time to format the data properly, build that semantic model, I'm able to empower people to do things that I never even dreamed of.
Which goes to show that once you begin thinking along these features as assets, there are certain additional non-technical activities that will help you along the way. Training is one of them. So if you properly train your audience to do these things, the value is there for them to just use these tools on their own without having to send every new report request to a centralized BI team.
So let's wrap this up with one last brief look at what that centralized BI team can do, because these features don't only benefit the self-service end user. So we'll talk again about this in upcoming webinars, but if we look at how this medical visits data set was created in the first place, let's go back to the workspace where that was created, to this hospital visits workspace. We've already taken a look at lineage before. Let's do that one more time. I'm going to change this view to the lineage view so we can see how we put all of this magic together. So in this lineage view, we can see our dashboard over on the far right. And you can see that that key statistics dashboard is pulling from the two reports that we have, the medical visits and rankings reports, which both pull from our certified and reusable medical visits data set. But that data set is using data flows. So we've got a calendar data flow here. We've got a reference data flow, which is where we pull departments and doctor names and things like that. And then we've got the source data for the actual visits and encounters and revenue and so on that we were modeling. Now, in a real environment, you would have behind this, instead of Excel, you would have SQL or Oracle or Azure Data Lake connections and all kinds of other things. But you can see that these data flows can be combined in new ways. So for example, if my BI team creates data flows that surface various key fact and dimension tables from our underlying data environment, I can recombine those in new ways to create new data sets. So if there was, for example, a 10-year data set from HR, a data flow that was available, I could combine that with my doctors and departments to figure out headcount over time. And now I've suddenly created a new data set, a new report where that wasn't available before. All right, so that brings us to the end of the live demos. I want to share just one other item here, and that is because for the sake of time, we couldn't show every possible way to reuse data assets. This is just a snapshot of all of the different integration points that are available today for Power BI for a data asset that you create. I was going to do a gratuitous animation to have these all appear, over time or something like that, but just for the sake of time, wanted to leave you with this as an inspiration, whether it's SharePoint or Power Pages for intranet development, or the mobile apps or integrations with Power Automate for automatic rules. This is a platform that really can enable and empower self-service. The key is taking those decisions up front to build the data assets in a reusable way, as we talked about before.
Thank you, Lars. As we come to the end of this first webinar in this series, I just want to highlight this quote from Robert Kiyosaki: "Doing more with less is a crucial principle to learn, especially if you are going to be in business in this rapidly changing world." And what I like about this quote is that it makes this doing more with less, which often we feel as a constraint imposed on us, right? Every team is getting beat up with do more with less and less resources, fewer and fewer resources. It changes the way you look at it to say, okay, well, it's a principle that can be learned, especially when it comes to Power BI. If you learn how to build and structure the architecture of your solutions the right way, you can actually do more and deliver more value with less. And that's what we hope you are beginning to envision with this first webinar where we explore the different benefits. And in the next one, we'll look at some of the bad ways to approach this, and then conclude with the third one, which will be what are the best practices. So we hope you'll join us with those. Before we leave, we are going to open up again for some Q&A if you have some questions. And also remind you that there will be an ebook that will be published after the series of these webinars are concluded, just recapping the key takeaways. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And Lars, do you want to kick off the poll just to get some feedback from our audience as well, please?
Oh, thank you. Yes, absolutely. All right, well, everyone, thank you for your time. As Jean-Luc said, we are going to be sending out an ebook for everyone who has attended the webinar. For those who are watching this recording, if you sign up for our mailing list, you can also be added to the list of people who get a copy of that ebook. And we will see you next time for all the ways that data reuse can go wrong.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.